at least $6 trillion was wiped off the New York Stock Exchange because one guy said, hey, tariffs.
This is a direct attack.
That is twice the size of the Indian economy as a whole. Now, what could we have done with those $6 trillion in a place like India? How is it possible that billionaires added billions and billions and billions to their wealth in stock when that was happening? There's enough food being grown to feed the whole world, but yet still we have hunger. There's more than enough money for everyone to have a home, but yet still there are the homeless. Meanwhile, everyone else is suffering in the real economy. But capitalism as a system will always have winners and losers. My question is, do we really want normal? Hey friends, what's happening? It is Jeff Goldberg broadcasting live from Studio 4C, Mumbai, from the Jeff Goldberg studio. And today we're bringing you episode 5 of the Gora Monologues. Now, full disclosure, we're recording this and it is actually in April. Today, the United States has paused its tariffs for 90 days, and the world, which was looking at a major recession, or at least going off a cliff in terms of all that was happening vis-a-vis the stock markets, has all seemed to relax for a moment. Now, by the time you watch this, there's a really good chance that everything will have changed, because knowing the current administration in the United States at the White House, everything changes rather quick. But the topic that was suggested was to talk about tariffs, to talk about trade, to talk about the global economy writ large. So I think there's a more broad thing to talk about, which is a little bit interesting, which is what is the opportunity that this chaos actually creates for us? The New World Order. The New World Order, which came into being in the 1940s at the Bretton Woods Conference, John Maynard Keynes leading the way and helping America set it up the global economy of the free world, the democratic world, the capitalist world after World War II in opposition to the communist world. It seems like the current administration at the White House is in the mood to change all that and create some sort of shockwaves and to reprogram things and to rethink those things. And we even see iterations of that throughout the 20th century and other times, like when Nixon in the 1970s took the United States off the gold standard, or like when Nixon went to China and opened up China, and that's when the Chinese economic miracle really began in the mid-1970s. Or, of course, Ronald Reagan and his trickle-down economics, or when Thatcher in the United Kingdom started to break the unions and the coal mines, and, of course, brought the United Kingdom into a more neoliberal capitalist bent. And this was all, of course, the whole free markets, free traders, people from the University of Chicago like Milton Friedman. And the whole construct of the system has been to free trade and the free-flowing ability of products and people. But the fact of the matter is that right now this chaos has put a question mark next to all of that. Now, the big thing and the big brains at the banks are going to try to fix that and put it back to the way it was, which was a way that let's get back to normal, right? Let's go back to normal. My question is, was normal really good? And do we really want normal? And was the way that it was all set up before actually the way it should be? And I think that's a broader question that no one wants to ask, because it requires a little bit of thought, and it requires a little bit of philosophy, it requires a little bit of history, it requires a little bit of economics, and it requires a little bit of courage. The courage to say that the way the global capitalist system was working wasn't equitable. Surely countries were getting richer. Surely economies that were not developed had begun to develop. Surely we saw many people lift out of poverty. And that's wonderful. And those are beautiful goals. And those are incredible things to aspire to. But capitalism as a system will always have winners and losers. It'll always have a hierarchy built on who has more money than someone else. And that purchasing power will provide them the ability to manipulate things. And they're not manipulating them in a bad way. They're not bad people. The word manipulation has this stigma, like somehow there's these maniacal people ruling the world, which, 19th century Marxist thinkers and even early 20th century Marxists wouldn't have you believe. The fact of the matter is that self-interest, which is one of the principles of capitalism, is not going anywhere. But I think that there's a moment here where we can pivot and start to think about what is self-interest. And what is the benefit of self-interest, not just to me, my home, my family, my friends, my community, my country, but rather all of us? Is our community just the one that we see on the street we live on? Is our community just the one in the town or the village or the hamlet or the city or the state or the country or the province we live in? And the answer is, maybe it's all of us. We have something that we never had before, which is the technology, the ability, the communications, and the transportation to feed, clothe, house the whole world. That's right. There's enough food being grown on the fields of the Midwest of the United States or the pastures of the Ukraine or the Punjab of India and other wonderful places to feed the whole world. But yet still we have hunger. There's more than enough money for everyone to have a home, but yet still there are the homeless. There are more than enough things for us to do where we could address the real questions. Now, I'm not suggesting that this shock that Trump has put in place is the tsunami that has to be the change. But I think that in moments like this, it provides a tear in what we consider normal. And that tear has to be something that we're more thoughtful about. And really ask, is that thing going to be more equitable, more beneficial to all? Because we constantly think in terms of very, very narrow divisions that we're not really thinking globally or about all of humanity. So this is the question that I think we should be considering, which is, how can we use this moment to have a broader conversation about not just the change we want to be, but the change that we can become? Because, folks, there is no doubt we have the ability, the technology, the money, the transportation, the knowledge to do this. We just choose not to. The thing that stops us every time is to divorce ourselves from is the stock market. The stock market are designed to be the flow of money and how that money flows from central banks to investment banks to regular banks to savings and loans, and how people use those instruments as a means to float and move through the entire economy. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an economist and I understand all of this intimately well. There are people who are far more brilliant at that, like I mentioned in the previous podcast, Yanis Varoufakis, of course, Larry Summers, and many other thinkers on all sides of the spectrum, including the wonderful and great late former Prime Minister and Finance Minister and Professor Emeritus at Cambridge University, Manmohan Singh. But folks, what I'm trying to say is that ultimately we think of financial markets as the real economy when in fact they're not. And that is a big problem. Surely they make up a percentage of the economy. Like, for instance, in the United States, the New York Stock Exchange, which is its financial market, is about 8 to 12% of the GDP of the whole country. Okay, fair enough, great. But let's not confuse that percentage for the other overwhelming majority of manufacturing jobs, farming, medium and small enterprises, large businesses, telecommunications, technology, entertainment, automotive, energy, and everything else under the sun. Let's not confuse that one market for the whole market. But in the modern neoliberal capitalist world, they have decoupled. And proof of that is no better seen than take a look at the pandemic, where you see people who are benefiting enormously by the stock market. Meanwhile, everyone else is suffering in the real economy. Surely stocks went off a cliff at the beginning of the pandemic. But how is it possible that billionaires added billions and billions and billions to their wealth in stock when that was happening? That's a confusing question, isn't it? Right? Now, it's not one that I have time or really even the know-how to answer. I invite you to research that. But what I would say is this, is that we are continuing to confuse the financial economy for the real economy. And you are the real economy. The job you do is the real economy. The groceries you buy are the real economy. The travel and the holidays you take are the real economy. The clothes you buy are the real economy. The things in your closet, the things on your shelves, these are the real economy. You can put your hands on them. They exist, and that's who we are. So I think the first thing that we can do in addressing this change that we might want to have is, what is the real economy, and how does the real economy benefit the real people? How does it benefit you and your families and your friends and everyone writ large? How does it do that? How does your purchasing power and your salary and your rent or your mortgage stack up against the cost of living, inflation? Because we hear these words all the time, and they exist like clouds over our heads, and we don't even know from whence they come and where they will go and how long they will be there. We're not sure if they're going to thunder and drop rain on us. We're not sure if they're just going to block the sun for a while and then move on. And we're constantly living in this fear that we have to look up at the sky to understand what the financial, economic weather is. And we feel powerless in that process. And I think that's another lesson from this particular moment of trade tariffs. No one person, president, prime minister, king, queen, should have the power to send trillions of dollars off a cliff and just write them off. And an example would be, since this happened, at least $6 trillion was wiped off the New York Stock Exchange. Now, some of that's come back since the pause was announced, no doubt. But $6 trillion, let's contextualize that. That is twice the size, approximately, of the Indian economy as a whole. So let's put that in real numbers terms, okay? Let's get out our spreadsheets. What that means in real terms is that the U.S. New York Stock Exchange lost twice the size, approximately, of the whole Indian economy, which means that twice the GDP of the largest, most populated country in the world, 1.5 billion people, was lost. Now, what could we have done with those $6 trillion? In a place like India, I can think of a few things we could have done, like my favorite pet topic, fix the roads, fix the highways, fix the air quality, or even better things like running water, 24-hour electricity to certain villages and parts of the country, gas cylinders, which many people need to cook their food. There's so much we could have done with that money in terms of how we would invest it back in ourselves for the betterment of our society. But this one place on Wall Street with a very, 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 very small group of folks lost $6 trillion, $6 trillion in the space of a few days because one guy said, hey, tariffs. There's something fundamentally wrong about that. That doesn't mean that I agree or disagree with the tariffs or with the president or with the prime minister. Let's be clear. This isn't a political issue. It's a people issue. It's an economics issue. It's the amount of cash you have in your wallet, in your pocket. It's the amount of money you have in your bank account, because that's the real economy for you. And too often we have our heads down looking at these salacious headlines and these exciting videos, but we forget it actually is affecting us. And we have to look at the places where it's affecting us. And we have to look at them in a very holistic and thoughtful manner. Because I think any person you'd ask, from top to bottom, from left to right, from country to country, from culture to culture, from language to language, from religion to religion, would tell you that they want more purchasing power. That is freedom, isn't it? In a world where money provides a certain degree of latitude of choice, I don't know anybody that wants to not have choice. Choice is a fundamental part of the human experience and the human condition. And this system that has just been torn to shreds or ripped just even a little bit is one that, if we go back to normal, I worry deeply that the new normal will just be a continuation of a system that diminishes many, impoverishes many more, leaves children hungry, men and women homeless, and doesn't really provide, when we have more than enough food, more than enough energy, more than enough of everything to feed, clothe, and take care of ourselves. And we just don't. Now, Am I a communist? No, I'm not a communist. I'm not about to bust out the Karl Marx's manifesto and read from Das Kapital or quote Engels. That's not it. Or Stalin or Lenin or Mao. No. Let's get away from the political inferences of communism and let's move over to the ideals of sharing. I don't think anybody disagrees with that, because this isn't about one people, one nation, one man, or one set of ideas. It's about all of us. And I think that this particular moment should show us that this one decision by one person halfway around the world from where I am sitting, I don't know how far they are from where you're sitting, had an effect on all of us. That is not power. That is evil. That's not okay that someone can do that. Now, I'm sure the news, by the time you watch this, will have every answer under the sun as to why this was done. But none of them will get to the root of what it really did, which is it scared the heck out of everyone. Everyone was looking at a recession and saying no. Everyone was looking at tariffs and saying no. And that is something that I think is important to recognize. And just like when the pandemic struck, we all kind of for a minute knew that everyone else alive was going through the same thing. This is a similar moment, isn't it? Because we're all going through the same thing. So, whilst the spark of today's topic has been the tariffs out of the United States and the trade war that was almost, but might still be by the time you watch this, maybe they've dropped more nuclear economic bombs on each other. I just wanted to put my thought out there, which is simply this. Whatever you think is best for what comes next, maybe it should be something as a bit more equitable for all. Call it whatever you want. But I think that equability of freedom, of choice, of financial stability, of food on our tables, of kindness in our hearts, and neighborly feelings, yeah, those all sound like cheesy things that you'd hear someone say. You know what? I'm perfectly at peace with you thinking I'm cheesy. Because from me to you and your family, it's all about love. So, this has been episode 5 of the Gora Monologues, broadcasting to you live from Studio 4C, Mumbai, India. Ciao, y'all.